Zelete, thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. For decades, we have been told that the Western alliance between the United States and France is unbreakable. We have heard the endless speeches about shared values, democracy, and historic brotherhood stretching all the way back to the American Revolution and the beaches of Normandy. That illusion completely collapsed at the United Nations Security Council. What happened was not just a minor diplomatic disagreement behind closed doors. It was a dramatic public showdown on the world stage. The United States delegation physically walked out during France's official intervention when an American diplomat walks out on a French ambassador during a live session of UN Security Council. It sends a clear signal to the entire world. Washington is no longer to tolerate Paris, and Paris is no longer ready to bow down to Washington. This explosive rift went from a walkout to a full-blown war of words. American envoy called French foreign policy disingenuous grandstanding and politicized drivel. French diplomats fired right back, declaring that America is now isolated, standing side by side with authoritarian regimes and using the hashtag America is alone. An American congressman even publicly mocked France's historic military surrender in World War II. If you think this is just a drama between rich Western countries, think again. This rift changes everything, especially for Africa. To understand how the permanent members of the UN Security Council reached this point, we have to look at the exact moment the walkout happened and what was said immediately after. The tension reached a boiling point over two main issues, the war in Ukraine and the election of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. When France took the floor to deliver its statement on global human rights and international security, American diplomats stood up and walked out of the room. A few moments later, U.S. envoy Dan Nigre stepped before the microphones and delivered one of the most brutal attacks against a treaty ally in modern UN history. Here is the exact quote delivered by U.S. Dan. Quote, finally, I must point out that there is a member of this council that will feign moral outrage and pretend to lecture the rest of us about every topic, whether it's about the very conflict we are discussing yet again today, or even those related to international peace and security like human rights. That is why we walked out during France's intervention. This indigenous grandstanding is tiresome. We have stood by those member states through every conflict in which their freedoms have been imperiled. And today I remind them that it is the United States that remains the beacon of liberty for the world. As such, we will not be affording them the benefit of listening to their politicized drivel until they renounce their condescending and disrespectful rhetoric. End of quote.
Finally,
Por fim, devo salientar que há um membro deste Conselho que vai fingir indignação moral e tentar dar lições ao restante de nós sobre os temas, seja sobre o próprio conflito que estamos discutindo mais uma vez hoje, seja até sobre assuntos sem relação com a paz e a segurança internacionais, como os direitos humanos. Foi por isso que saímos da sala durante a intervenção da França.
That is why we walked out during France's intervention.
A saída de uma delegação durante uma sessão do Conselho de Segurança, o principal órgão decisório da ONU, do qual tanto a França quanto os Estados Unidos são membros permanentes com poder de veto, é algo muito raro. Na sexta-feira, os Estados Unidos foram um dos 10 países que votaram na Assembleia Geral contra a prorrogação do mandato de Volker Turk como alto comissário da ONU para os Direitos Humanos, se alinhando a países como Coreia do Norte, Rússia e Nicarágua.
The American delegation left. This Monday, a UN Security Council meeting, when the ambassador of France began to speak. The departure from the site was a protest against French statements that compared the United States, North Korea, and other authoritarian states for your votes on human rights issues. denigrated. Representative of the United States at the general meeting and senior official of the U.S. delegation, what he classified as a misleading by Paris. Finally, I should point out that there is one member of this board who will pretend moral outrage and try to give lessons to the rest of us on the topics, whether about the conflict itself that we are discussing again today, be even about subjects unrelated to international peace and security, like human rights. That's why we left the room during the French intervention. The departure of a delegation during a session of the Safety Council, the main decision-making body of the UN, from which both France and the United States are permanent members with veto power, is something very rare. On Friday, the United States was one of 10 countries that voted at the general meeting against the extension of Volker Turkey's mandate as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, aligning with countries like North Korea, Russia, and Nicaragua.
Washington brought up historic dates, reminding Paris that American soldiers fought for French freedom in world wars, and asserted that America, not France or Europe, is the world's beacon of liberty. France did not sit quietly and accept the insult. French diplomats immediately struck back at the core of American moral authority, pointing out a major contradiction in how Washington behaves at the United Nations. The immediate battleground was the reappointment of Volker Turk as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Turk was reappointed for another 4-year term after a massive majority voted in his favor. 144 nations voted yes. Only 10 countries said no. Who were those 10 countries? The United States voted no, alongside Israel, Russia, Argentina, and a handful of authoritarian governments. American officials accused Volker Turk of putting the UN human rights system on its deathbed by calling out American sanctions on Cuba, criticizing Israel, and failing to act fast enough on other regimes. France seized on this vote to show the world that it is actually Washington, not Paris, that has lost its moral compass. Here is what the official French diplomatic mission declared in response. Quote, America used to be a beacon of human rights, but now it stands isolated, aligned with governments it frequently condemns. The world is no longer listening to Washington. End of quote. To drive the point home, French diplomats circulated the hashtag America Alone. France reminded the world that the UN Charter was drafted in San Francisco and that France donated the Statue of Liberty to the United States as a symbol of shared ideals. But France's message was clear. America has abandoned those ideals, and Paris will not be intimidated into silence by Washington. The thing got even dirtier when U.S. Ambassador Mick Waltz accused France of protecting oppressive governments while lecturing alliance, and an American congressman publicly mocked France's defeat in 1940. When diplomats resorted to World War II jokes, you know the institution trust is completely broken. Why is this happening right now? Why are two of the oldest allies on earth tearing each other apart in front of global news cameras? There are 3 primary reasons for this breakdown. The United States is moving increasingly towards transitional unilateralism. Washington's message is simple. If you do not support our geopolitical strategy 100%, we will cut your funding, walk out of your meetings, and ignore your institutions. France, on the other hand, wants what French President Emmanuel Macron calls strategic autonomy. France wants Europe to act as independent superpower that can negotiate with China, trade with Africa, and challenge America when Washington goes too far. For decades, the West maintained global power by claiming to respect universal human rights and international law. Today, that narrative has fractured. I hope we are seeing what is happening. Africans, The same people who are preaching dependency on us are preaching independence on themselves and are not ready to bow down to the United States of America. Yet, they come to Africa lecturing Africans how to be dependent, how we cannot survive without them. And you have heard them telling the same people who are here to tell us that they are the ones who can set us free, even when we ask them to go. And we are showing the world that the African is capable. They still sit down and give us deadlines, telling us when our regimes will end, making it look as if without them we cannot survive. But the United States of America said, without them, World War II, that in world wars, they fought for them, they saved them. You saw the death and other things. And at the end of the day, these are the people we are still signing security pacts with to come into Africa to save us. You see that Europe entirely depends heavily on the United States of America. They can never do anything without them. So, as Africans, we still sit here expecting the same people who are so dependent that can take their independent decisions to come into Africa to be commanding us around. This is amazing. See what happened in the United Nations. It is whom? Have you seen how they are washing their dirty clothes? And after this, Africans will still sit here for people to be commanding us. This is a huge showcase. To the point that they are going back into World War so 1940s to bring out issues. This was not a small fight. This was a real battleground. Africa, are you watching? I hope we are learning, oh. It's the same way people always point a finger at us if we don't rise up to fight for our total liberation. We are the only ones that can set ourselves free. United we stand, divided we fall. And united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's colonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we'll make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, United States and France.